So thank you all for your time today. Really important for us all, the launch of the Level 7 Archivist and Records Manager Apprenticeship. My name's Laura Ganderhow. I'm going to chair today's event. I'm the Interim Director for Policy at CC Skills, which is Creative and Cultural Skills. So now it gives me great pleasure, and I'd love to welcome Jeff James, who's the CEO and also the Keeper of the National Archives, who's going to start us off. Thank you.
I love that contrast between all those technical instructions and turn right by the postbox. It's fantastic, isn't it? So yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff James. I'm the Chief Exec and Keeper of the National Archives, as you've just heard. And it's my great pleasure to welcome you to this morning's launch of the Level 7 Archivist and Records Manager Apprenticeships. It's good to see those attending in person, but also I understand we have over 100 people joining us online, so I hope that you can hear and see us clearly, and you're very welcome. I'm just going to make a few introductions before I talk to you about the apprenticeships. So this morning, you're going to hear from Gail Isaac and Jenny Pistella from Westminster Adult Education Service, will be the off-the-job training organisation for the apprenticeships. Joe Cornish and Sonia Ramdian from SILIP Pathways, which will be the endpoint assessment organisation, and Anthony Skates from Creative and Cultural Skills, who will be running training to help archives feel ready to employ an apprentice. Before I hand over to the other speakers, I guess I'd just like to introduce some aspects of the apprenticeships. I'll then talk briefly about how we got to this point. And then finally, I'll let you know which archives will be taking part in the very first cohort of apprenticeships which start this month. So, what are the Level 7 Archivist and Records Manager apprenticeships? These new apprenticeships will include 3 years of learning, followed by a 6-month assessment period. During the 3 years, apprentices will spend 80% of their time, or the equivalent of 4 days a week, undertaking on-the-job training, getting involved in an archive's real projects and boosting the capacity of the organisation. For the remaining day each week, apprentices will undertake off-the-job training with Westminster Adult Education Service. This training will be delivered mostly online, alongside regular in-person sessions. Gail will say more about this when I hand over in a moment. These apprenticeships are real jobs, with apprentices employed full-time, receiving the usual benefits of full-time employees, such as salary, pensions, and annual leave. As a Level 7 qualification, the apprenticeship is the equivalent of a postgrad qualification. It was designed this way to give it parity with the Masters in Archives Management, currently the main route into the sector. While the Masters courses will continue to be the right choice for many, the Level 7 apprenticeship will provide an alternative technical training route so that new people can join the archive sector and become qualified archivists. There are several reasons why these apprenticeships will allow a wider range of people to join our profession. The first is the combination of both off-the-job and on-the-job learning. This approach not only gives apprentices several years of real experience as an archivist, making them highly employable once qualified, but it also means that people who wouldn't undertake an academic qualification for a variety of reasons now have the opportunity to pursue a career in archives. Secondly, apprentices earn while they learn, meaning that the financial barriers to becoming an archivist are lessened. I know that there's already a great deal of support for these apprenticeships and that the scheme has been a long time in the making. Around 5 years ago, we brought together an apprenticeship trailblazer group made up of knowledgeable representatives from across the sector. This group developed the Archivist Apprenticeship Standard, which lists all the knowledge, skills and behaviours, or KSBs, that an apprentice needs to demonstrate before completing their apprenticeship. In 2021, the Institute for Apprenticeships and Technical Education approved this standard. And I'd like to thank everybody who helped develop this fundamental framework for the apprenticeships. After this initial phase, we worked to find the right organisations to provide job training and final assessments. That's why we've got Westminster Adult Education Service and Sillet Pathways with us today. We've also worked very closely with the Archives and Records Association to ensure that the apprenticeship standard and assessment process matches their competency frameworks and standards for qualified archivists. So thank you to ARA for their support on this, including help with finding archivists to act as endpoint assessors. With these components in place, we were then able to start talking to interested archive services. To date, we've engaged with over 60 about employing a level 7 apprentice, and I'm delighted to announce that 22 people are starting their apprenticeships at 17 different organisations this month. There are archives in local authorities, in universities, museums, theatres and private organisations all taking part, including in the North and the Midlands, Durham University, Knowsley Council, Lincolnshire County Council, Nottinghamshire Archives, the Railway Museum as part of the Science Museum Group, and St Helens Archive Service. In London and the South East, Barts NHS Archive Trust, LMA, the Mercers Company, the National Army Museum, the National Theatre, St John's College, University of Oxford, and the University of Greenwich. And in the Southwest, Dorset History Centre, Portsmouth Council, Plymouth Council, and the Science Museum Group's National Collection Centre. So thank you to all of these organisations for being apprenticeship pioneers. This is a good moment to point out that any organisation with qualified archive staff and with the capacity to support an apprentice can join the scheme, which builds on our previous workforce development programmes, including Skills for the Future and Bridging the Digital Gap traineeship scheme. It's also important to say that these new apprenticeships belong to the sector and are a tool that you can all use independently to recruit the very best. The National Archives is here to support the scheme rather than to choose which organisations can employ an apprenticeship. So please do reach out if you'd like to discuss employing an apprentice for next year, and the team will be very happy to help. Part of our commitment to supporting the Level 7 apprenticeships and diversifying the archives workforce is commissioning creative and cultural skills to run a series of workshops to help prepare archives for apprenticeships. Anthony's going to give more details on this shortly. So once again, thank you for joining us today, whether you're here in person or online. As a former apprentice myself, I understand how valuable apprenticeships are and the difference that they can make to a person's career. I'm now going to hand over to Gail Isaac and Jenny Pistella to say a bit more about the off-the-job training. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'm Gail Isaac. I'm the Head of Apprenticeships and Professional Pathways at Westminster Adult Education. And
I'm Jenny Pistella, and I am the Apprenticeship Manager at Westminster Adult Education Service.
Thank you. So it was this time last year that we were approached by IFATE and the National Archives to start discussions about whether or not we wanted to and were able to deliver the Level 7 Archivist and Records Manager apprenticeship, and it has been an incredibly busy year. We have got there in the end, and we are very excited and delighted to be starting the apprentices this month. The length and the breadth of the country, not bad for a relatively small apprenticeship training provider based just in London. So we're very excited. So let me just check now. Sorry, let me just step back a bit, Jenny. Bear with me. Oh, no. Oh, let me just check. Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, we have our first cohort starting this month in October. Sorry, so I have to go there. I have to go like this. And so we've got 18 employers with 20 people online can't hear. Okay. So we've got 18 employers with 22 apprentices starting in October of this year. The on-programme period, so that's the time in which the apprentices are in learning, is 36 months. And that is when in the workplace they develop and embed the knowledge, skills and behaviours of the apprenticeship standard. And we, the training provider, provide the training, the insight and signpost them to really learn the knowledge and learn the skills and really embed and develop the behaviours in the workplace. As part of the apprenticeship standard, the apprentices have to have maths and English functional skill at level 2, which is equivalent to GCSE grade A to C or 9 to B. If they don't have that if they don't have functional skills, then we can provide the training to enable them to complete the functional skills before they go through the gateway period. The gateway period, gateway sounds like this mystical thing. I don't know why it was termed gateway, but it basically means that when an apprentice completes their on-programme period of learning, they then they have to have completed their 20% off the job training requirement, and they have done all of the learning. So they go through gateway, and then the gateway period for this standard is 4 to 6 months. And this is the time that they are preparing for the endpoint assessment, which they will complete with CILIT, the Endpoint Assessment Organisation. And there's a link here. I presume that the slides will be shared around afterwards. There's a link here for the standard. So the delivery model. Now, because we're delivering this nationally, we really had to listen to the employers. Traditionally, what we do in London is if you think of a rolling month, in week 1 of the month, it would be an on-site in-person taught session. Week 2 would be directed self-study. Week 3 would be an online taught session, and week 4 would be directed self-study, and that rolls. So every month there's a face-to-face taught session. But because this is we're delivering this nationally, and because of the scatter of apprentices, employers were saying that they realistically didn't want their apprentices travelling from, you know, one side of the north of the country to the other side for their face-to-face taught sessions. So we've amended our delivery model so that there's a face-to-face taught session at the host employer. And then for the remaining weeks, it's online taught sessions every other week. And then they do the directed self-study in their off weeks. The directed self-study is where they are putting together their assignments that form the portfolio of evidence for endpoint assessment. And these are set. Jenny has been working with our trainer assessors to come up with the assignments that meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours required for the professional discussion at the end. And as I said, there's themes set out in the scheme of learning. We have got a massive scheme of learning that is very, very detailed. I've got a small snapshot on one of my next slides. Apprentices have to complete a journal entry once a month where they have to record their off-the-job training. And off-the-job training isn't just what they do in the classroom with us or the directed self-study. If they're doing work shadowing in the workplace, if they attend a training course in the workplace that is linked to their job and the apprenticeship, that counts towards the 20% off the job training as well. Review meetings take place. So the first one takes place 4 weeks after sign up, just to check that everybody's settling in well and that everybody understands their roles and responsibilities. That is always face to face. Thereafter, the progress reviews are done every 8 weeks, and that's a mix of face-to-face and online. And we use an e-portfolio system called OneFile. Gone are the days when everyone carries around those massive lever arch folders. I remember when I was assessing, I used to say to my apprentices, if your house is on fire, forget the family photo albums, take your portfolio with you. So Here's a scheme of learning. Jenny, do you want to talk through this because you're more on the ground? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the apprenticeship manager, and I'm going to be working really closely with our amazing team of 3 trainer assessors who we have contracted to deliver all of the teaching and learning for this. So what I've done is I have taken the all of the different knowledge, skills and behaviours and the criteria that the apprentices need to cover, and I've tried to put it into different themed months so that they are creating an assignment actually once every 2 months, and that will form, as Gail said, their pieces of evidence for their endpoint assessment portfolio. That's only one part of the assessment. The other part is a work project that they devise, create and then deliver as well. So this is given to all of the apprentices. They know what's coming up, they know what that they're going to be looking at per month, and also to all employers as well, so that you can see the kinds of things that your apprentices are going to be asked to look at and kind of provide evidence for. Now, of course, because we have 22 different apprentices, it's not designed so that all the apprentices do exactly the same types of skills every month, because it's a holistic assessment method, and we'll have different apprentices doing different roles, doing different projects, slightly different things, and every archive has its own kind of flow throughout the year of things that that work and what's the focus. So although this is the scheme of learning, it is quite flexible actually within an apprenticeship. So say, for example, we're looking at, I don't know, copyright compliance in 1 month, and actually you as an organisation have training on that in July, but the assignment is due in March. So what we do is we're really pragmatic within apprenticeship delivery and learning. So what we would do, we'd say, okay, write what you can for now, and then just put a marker in it, go back when you've had that training and you can add to it. That's the beauty of endpoint assessment. It is holistic, and you can add to assignments and to your portfolio of evidence throughout the time period of the apprenticeship. So the scheme of learning is a guide, and we use that. We want to set assignments regularly, and we want the learners and the apprentices to do the work, but also it's flexible in terms of what they're doing specifically in their workplace.
Thank you. I'm sure I'm going to steal your thunder now, ladies. Can talk about endpoint assessment. As Jenny said, there's 2 aspects to endpoint assessment. There's a professional discussion, which is based on the portfolio of evidence, the assignments that we ask the apprentices to produce whilst they're on programme, and we support them and we assess that they are fit for purpose and meet the knowledge, skills and behaviours required. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sure I'm right. I hope I'm right. The professional discussion is 150 minutes. Based on 15 assignments. Yeah. Okay. And then as Jenny said, they have to complete a project. It has to be a real project. It's not just well, let's pretend we did this. It needs to be really robust and detailed, and based around an improvement to be made, a new idea to do within the organisation. So the apprentices have to come up with that concept. It has to be agreed with the employer, and goes off to CILIP, and the CILIP have to check and say, yes, we agree that this is a great project. And then the apprentice goes and does that project. They see it through, they evaluate it, and then prepare a presentation. Now, they have a long time to do this, but they should, because it's a level 7 apprenticeship. So it needs to be really detailed and robust. And this typically takes 150 hours to complete. Yeah, cool. Thank you. So throughout the gateway period, We don't deliver taught sessions. It's very much one-to-one support for the apprentice, just giving them guidance and support around their project. And as you know, Jenny does with all of our existing apprentices, is doing run-throughs of professional discussions so that they're building their confidence in sitting in front of an endpoint assessor to present their project and to do a professional discussion. Recruitment. So we offer three different levels of recruitment support: bronze, silver and gold. Bronze, we can advertise your apprenticeship vacancy on the Digital Apprenticeship Service site. And then all applications go to you for you to shortlist and arrange interviews. Silver is we do bronze, but we will also shortlist for you based on your criteria. Recently, we advertised for a libraries apprenticeship for an employer in London, 110 120 applications, and they were very pleased that they had asked us to shortlist. And I think, Jenny, you managed to shortlist down to 20, and then the employer shortlisted further to decide who they wanted to interview. And then what we would do at the end, once they appoint someone, is we provide feedback to the people that unfortunately didn't make it through. And then gold is we do all of that, but Jenny will sit in on the panel as well. And it's normally employers that have never taken on an apprentice or are a little bit unsure of what to look for an apprentice that takes up on that offer. And that's really beneficial. I've done it once as well, and it was absolutely fantastic seeing the variety of people that were so keen to join this apprenticeship. So the role of the employer, so you have to ensure that your apprentice has a contract of employment for, I would say, a minimum of 42 months. We do say if you can do a couple of months more, just as a bit of leeway, because if an apprentice unfortunately goes off sick for a period of time or has to go on a break in learning, that hits the pause button for the apprenticeship. And then when they come back, it starts it again. But obviously your contract of employment would have continued, or if they fail an aspect of their endpoint assessment and need to resit. So that's why we ask for a little bit of leeway. It's vital that the apprentice's line manager understands their role within the apprenticeship triangle. I'm a firm believer in the apprenticeship triangle, because if the training provider's not there or not committed, the apprentice isn't there or not committed, or the employer's not there or not committed, that triangle, one of those corners disappears and it falls apart, and the apprentice is never going to achieve. It's really great, if at all possible, for the apprentice to have a separate mentor from their line manager, someone that they can go and talk to, sound off ideas about, and sort of have possibly more open conversations than they may do their line manager. Progress reviews, it's absolutely vital that the apprentice's line manager is in attendance. If they can't attend, then we will reschedule, and they do have to be there. And do have to release the apprentices for their taught sessions and allow them the time off for their directed self-study. And then ensure in the workplace the apprentice has the opportunity to develop the knowledge, skills and behaviours. Provide support and guidance and a nice nurturing environment, and be involved in the initial agreement of the project. It's vital that the employers are on board. And I will say, I've been working in apprenticeships a long time across hospitality, construction, medical and cultural and creative. And the cultural and creative employers are without a doubt the best, most supportive employers I've ever come. So I congratulate you all. Thank you. Before I just finish off, Jonathan's asked me to speak about the funding. So this apprenticeship standard is funded at £12,000. Okay, the way you can pay for that, if you are a levy paying employer, that means if you have an annual salary bill of £3 million or more, you will be a levy paying employer. So at source, money will be taken from you as the employer and put into your digital apprenticeship service account, shortened to the DAS.
And that money builds up, builds up, builds up, and it stays there for 24 months and then drops off. Okay, so that's how you would pay it if you were a levy paying employer. So we link to you via the digital apprenticeship service once we've signed the apprentice up, and that money gets drawn down monthly during the on programme period. Okay. If you are not a levy paying employer, then it's co-funded with the government. So you, the employer, pay just 5%, and then we draw the rest down from the employer. And what we will do from the government, sorry, and what we would do is we would set up an invoice agreement with you as the employer, and so invoice you, I don't know, maybe quarterly or something like that. I think that's it. Just so so what you were paying for is you're paying for the training and the endpoint assessment costs. What you are not paying for via the levy or from the co-funded government payment setup, you have to pay the apprentice's salary. If the apprentice has to travel, you know, you might reimburse their travel expenses. That I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. Any questions, or should we hold on till the panel? Okay. Super.
Thank you very much. Sorry, did you?
Well, no, I just wanted to say, because in case there are, I can recognise some familiar faces in the audience here. So if there's anyone who is part of our current cohort, do come and say hello to me, because I've met lots of you on email, but not in person. So just come and say hi and introduce yourself. Thank you.
So thank you very much. And then I'd like to, if you'd like to take a seat, and I'll call up our colleagues from CILIP to talk about the assessment details. Thank you.
Hello, it's fantastic to be here today. I'm Jo Cornish and I'm a Director of CILIP Pathways. I'm here with my colleague Sonia Ramdian, who is Director of Sector Development for CILIP. And we're here today to talk to you about Pathways, CILIP Pathways, as an endpoint assessment organisation, and to talk you through in some detail around what assessment looks like for this particular apprenticeship standard. Sonia is here because all assessment that CILIP is involved with falls within her strategic remit, including apprenticeships and the oversight of CILIP Pathways. I'm here today with my CILIP Pathways hat on. So I am the founder director of CILIP Pathways. I set up CILIP Pathways in March 2020. Not a lot else was going on at that point in our lives, but I set it up specifically to assess apprenticeships for our sector and related professions. So it is an incredibly rewarding part of our work, and it's been an absolute privilege to see the apprenticeship space growing and growing within the sector and the related professions. So it's something that we're really happy to be involved with and really happy to be here talking about today. So just going to, oh, thank you very much. I've got a lovely assistant. So I just wanted to give a little bit of clarity about the roles of CILIP and CILIP Pathways, because they are different organisations and they do get used a bit interchangeably. So the role of CILIP is as the professional association for the information professions, along with other sister associations that you'll be aware of too, who've helped develop both the standards we're involved with. And then CILIP Pathways is a separate entity that exists to provide assessment services, so it's a limited company. So the things that CILIP does, CILIP as a professional association, we are absolutely passionate about growing robust routes and alternative routes into the profession to diversify and allow us to draw from the broadest pool of talent possible. So as a professional body, what CILIP does is we support all individuals at whatever stage of their career they are, whichever route they've taken through the profession. We provide an apprenticeship network, a peer support network, so apprentices can talk to each other and build that sort of peer support. We have a workforce development hub, which looks at the offer for developing a workforce in general, but it also includes apprenticeships. And we also provide an employer best practice guide to apprenticeships. So if you get to the point where you think you want to take on an apprentice, it's starting to think about some hints and tips really about the ways you can make that a really rewarding experience for both parties, or all parties actually. And then there's CILIP Pathways, which is an endpoint assessment organisation, so known as an EPAO. And our role as an EPAO is to provide that final assessment service. So I use the analogy of a driving test. It's one that sort of sits well and people can connect to. The brilliant training providers in this are the driving instructors and the employers. They're the people giving the apprentice the knowledge they need to meet the standard of the apprenticeship. The role of CILIP Pathways in this process is to arrive as sort of the driving examiner. So we reach them towards the end of the process and we check to see if they have reached that standard or not. As that endpoint assessment organisation, we obviously work with the employers and the training providers to confirm that the apprentice is ready to move through Gateway. I love the term Gateway. I think it does sound magical, but that's what I like about it. So as they move through Gateway into the assessment period, we make sure that we are completely compliant with the assessment plan. There's an assessment plan that is created alongside the KSBs, alongside the apprenticeship, and it's really important that we are completely compliant with that. And we publish guidance for the stakeholders to help them through that assessment process and act as a point of contact for the trainers. I'm going to pass to Sonia now to take through a little bit of technical detail around that assessment process.
Okay. And I apologise first off for talking to the slides. One thing I want to do today is make sure you have enough information to go forward feeling confident that you can support your apprentices. So I am talking to the slides somewhat. And we do have a lot of sort of acronyms that we use. So I'll explain them as we go along and there will be some repetition. So the focus of this apprenticeship is using professional judgment and support of others to ensure the delivery, security and accessibility of records and other materials. So we assess this against 22 areas of knowledge, 25 skills and 8 behaviours. Collectively, they're known as KSBs. So that's the first acronym. The KSBs are decided by employers via the Trailblazer Group. So hopefully by this stage, you're a little bit aware about how an apprenticeship comes to be. And there's a Trailblazer Group that comes together and actually forms the framework for that apprenticeship. So it forms the standard, but it also forms the endpoint assessment plan as well in creating the apprenticeship. And as endpoint assessment organisations, we must follow that plan in assessing. The standard aligns with other professional recognition. So you've already heard how this offers parity with other academic qualifications. So it also aligns with professional recognition. So that professional recognition can come from ARA, the Archive and Records Association, or it can from CILIP, the Chartered Institute of Library and Information Professionals. And that's really important because once you're aligned with professional recognition, it ensures an onward pathway for your apprentices. So once they've completed, hopefully successfully, their apprenticeship, there's a pathway there for their continued development and their continued career support. So we come on to this jargon again. So EPAO, Endpoint Assessing Organisation, and Endpoint Assessment, we always refer to as EPA generally. So it's the final stage of an apprenticeship. It's an impartial assessment of whether an apprentice has developed the skills, knowledge and behaviours as outlined in the apprenticeship standard. They're conducted by independent bodies, the EPAOs, and they're designed by employers in the sector via the Trailblazer programs. The Trailblazer process. Sorry, I get tongue-tied. Each apprenticeship standard includes an endpoint assessment plan, which describes how the apprentice should be tested against the apprenticeship criteria using suitable methods. And as described already, the endpoint assessment organisation is separate from the employer and the training provider to ensure that assessment remains impartial. So as employers, how can you help your apprentices be ready for endpoint assessment? So understand the knowledge, skills and behaviours that they're going to be assessed against and that they will need to evidence in that training programme. Ensure that they've had the opportunities to develop and embed these. So it's not just knowing something, it's doing something to really have that good understanding of it in practice. Understand the assessment process that we'll go through. And actually, the soft side of things, create opportunities to build up their confidence, those soft skills, because they will need confidence when going through assessment. It's fair and it's impartial, but you're asked to discuss things in a way that perhaps you don't normally do in your job role. So make sure they have that confidence there in their soft skills. I've got the right notes here. And it looks like I don't. Anyway, I can speak anyway. So CILIP Pathways is an endpoint assessment organisation. As Joe's already explained, it's the wholly owned trading subsidiary of CILIP. It holds key relationships with ESFA and Ofcom. Joe can tell you a little more about these.
Yeah, fantastic. So The way we set up Select Pathways, we took legal advice because we have to have that degree of separation. So as Sonia says, we have got a completely separate and independent board of directors that runs Pathways as a subsidiary of SILIP. We have an audit process and a governance framework that relates to that. Importantly for yourself, we are really, we have to be registered and regulated. So we have strong relationships with both ESFA and with Ofqual, who make sure that we're externally quality assured and that we are delivering this assessment in a compliant way. We have an auditable trail of the decisions made and how we reach them, so we can provide that. And we also are able to provide advice and guidance to the relevant stakeholders on how we conduct or how to prepare for endpoint assessment. And that's done in partnership with SILIP as well to create resources for the whole profession. So it's not just people who are necessarily on programme. The assessors that we use have two sets of experience. They have to be embedded in the sector. As an employer, you need to know the person making those impartial decisions understands the world in which your apprentice is working in. So they have a level of sector experience to a required level. But they also obviously have to be good assessors. So they have an assessor qualification as well. And a really important role that we have as Pathways is to ensure standardisation. So doing training with those assessors to make sure that they are conducting those assessments in a consistent, fair, robust way. So that's how we work with our groups to deliver endpoint assessment. We've been delivering the level 3 library archive apprenticeship assessment since 2021, and we are approved to do the level 7 apprenticeship assessment for this particular standard as well. So it's something we're looking forward to adding into the programme for us. I think I'm coming back to you now, Sonia.
Forgive me for getting we're doing this in partnership. Skipping ahead. So the endpoint assessment for the level 7, it can only be arranged and started once the employer is satisfied that the apprentice is deemed to be consistently working at or above the level set out in the apprenticeship standard. So you as an employer must have confidence that your apprentice is actually at that level before you get to the assessment point. We talked about gateway being a gateway, sort of figuratively and literally. It's actually a period of time between the apprentice completing their training and commencing their endpoint assessment. So it's not just one point, it is a period of time. And they're asked to showcase their KSBs during that. And that's where they're doing their workplace project. The employer also must be satisfied that they've met those prerequisite requirements. So that's already been met by Westminster this morning. And they must be confident that they can be evidence to the endpoint assessment organisation. So as it's already been mentioned, that's a period, the endpoint assessment period in Gateway is typically around 6 months. So it's a formal stage point, and you must understand the timelines in that. Be well informed on what your apprentices will need to know, what they have to evidence, how they're required to do this, and how long they have to prepare for that assessment. You can best help support your apprentice. They will be in the thick of this. So think of yourselves as the extra check or the extra pair of eyes. Do they have ready what they should have? Do they understand the timelines and the dates that they will need to keep to? So the timelines are prescriptive and they're detailed in the endpoint assessment plan. And again, if you go online to IFATE and find the apprenticeship standard, you will find a copy of the endpoint assessment plan there as well. And as SILIP Pathways, we don't set these. So they're stated in the plan and we must keep to them. But I do want to reassure you that actually we have in place clear and fair arrangements for making reasonable adjustments for apprenticeship standard where they're needed. So the all-important information on the assessment. These are called Assessment Method 1 and Assessment Method 2. Actually, it's easier to think of them as Assessment Part 1 and Assessment Part 2. Because they're not different methods and they both actually need to be taken. They can be taken in any order, but they do both need to be taken. So the first one is a professional discussion underpinned by their portfolio. And you've been told already this morning about having this portfolio of evidence that they actually build up during their training. And assessment 2 is a work-based written project report and questioning. So that has 2 components to it, the report and the questioning. So for each assessment method, there are a number of KSBs that will be evidenced, and together the 2 methods cover all the KSBs for the standard. I've said that they must be taken and passed. So the overall outcomes for an apprenticeship are fail, pass or distinction. And hopefully we're thinking ahead to passes and distinction. So if an apprenticeship goes through the assessment for assessment method 1 and assessment method 2, if both are graded as distinctions, then they come out with a distinction. If they're both graded as passes, they come out with a pass. But if they're graded as a path and a distinction, they still come out as a pass. So you have to have both of them at the same level for that to be the overall level that's awarded. There is an opportunity for resits and retakes for either method or for both. So a resit does not require further learning, and it is simply a resit of that assessment method, whereas a retake does generally include further learning. So they would go away, do that learning, and then come and take the assessment method again. They only need to be assessed on what they didn't pass in the first time. So it isn't a full reassessment at that point. But you have to be mindful of the timeline. So we've already said that the resits would be within that 6 month period of the EPA. Retake can take longer, and they do have up to 9 months. But actually the timeline in the endpoint assessment plan is that everything should take 12 months at the maximum. So if you're at a point at which it's going to go over the 12-month period, then you're asked to retake the whole assessment again, not just bits that weren't passed the first time. So that's why I say it's really important for you as employers to keep an eye on, to make sure your apprentice understands those timelines and the dates, and where there are set points of the framework that they can't be adjusted. Obviously, there are always going to be circumstances that it's fair to make some adjustments for a candidate. So do have that conversation with us if you feel that's going to happen. So if we look in detail at assessment method 1, it has one component, the professional discussion underpinned by the portfolio. It's important to remember that portfolio is really important. It has the pieces of evidence that the apprentices have gathered, but it's not assessed in any way itself. It is simply there to underpin the professional discussion. So it's not graded and it's not assessed, but obviously the assessors will be looking at it and they'll be having this in-depth professional discussion with the apprentice. It does give the apprentice the opportunity to make detailed and proactive contributions within that discussion to confirm their competency across the KSBs. So it brings what they've got on paper or in digital format to life, to really understand underneath the hood of what they've done, what they've put into practice, what they've understood themselves. And it's a two-way discussion. So it involves both the assessor and the apprentice actively listening to each other and participating in a formal discussion, a formal conversation that draws upon a structured question bank. So where as an employer, how can you support your apprentices? It's really, again, looking at those soft skills they will need to have the confidence to fully participate and show themselves at their best. It'll be carried out online, so video conferencing. So make sure that you can provide the time, the space and the equipment to make sure that's something that the apprenticeship doesn't need to worry about. They're actually in a space that they're familiar with, that they're confident in, and that actually that's not something they have to be in the back of their mind anxious about. So assessment method 2, this is the project report, and it has two components. It's the project report itself and then questioning. The project should demonstrate the application of the required KSBs, and the subject, title and scope will be agreed between the employer and the endpoint assessing organisation, so CILIP in this instance, and that will be discussed at the gateway. Employers should allow 14 weeks maximum to carry out the project from the date of the EPA gateway and the date of the submission to the endpoint assessing organisation. And as already mentioned, that should take around 150 hours. The project report is generally a written report, and it's a minimum of 5,000 words plus or minus 10%. That isn't negotiable. It is a hard ask. It's a hard limit. So we have in other apprenticeships seen apprentices give reports that are way over or way under that. We have to send them back without them being assessed. They have to have that word limit and they have to be within those margins. And as I said, we can make fair and reasonable adjustments where required. So alongside that report, we have questioning. It's undertaken based on the report, and it's reviewed by the report itself is reviewed by the assessor, and then they build up what they want to ask the apprenticeship. It lasts for around minutes, or at least 40 minutes, and the assessor has the discretion to increase that time by 10%. Questions are based on the assessor's review of the work-based written project, and there's a minimum of 5 questions. It provides an opportunity to gain clarity on the apprentice's rationale behind their project, to ask questions about something that didn't quite come across in paper, to really dig around and understand, or to resolve points that they've read in the project report. CILIP Pathways makes the arrangements for the questioning with the apprentice's employer. Apprentices are given at least 2 weeks' notice of the date and the time of the questioning. So again, this is via online conferencing, and again, do your best to make sure that your apprenticeship has the time, space and familiarity with the circumstances of that, to make them feel as confident as possible.
Thank you, thanks. So a lot of technical detail there about the assessment. Don't worry, that's what we're here to do, is to guide you through, and we produce guidance that leads you through step by step. But it's really important that as you have an active connection to what the ask is, really to just give them the space, the time, the confidence to fully engage in that process. One of the things that matters to us as Pathways is that sort of cycle of feedback. When we assess, we seek feedback from our stakeholders, so from training providers and from periodically and from our apprentices. And because we want to continuously develop and improve our practice within the boundaries of the standard. And we'll share that feedback with the required stakeholders so we can continue to build a strong, robust assessment process for the sector. And then finally, we wanted to leave you sort of on a note of when we've reached that point, you've gone through assessment and the apprentices have achieved their pass or their distinction. So we wanted to flag the process for that. Once an apprentice has passed or gained their distinction, we submit that award. We inform that mark has been reached, and we request their certificate, which is their qualification. We also strongly encourage you to support your apprentices towards considering their future development. So those professional pathways with ARA and with CILIP around that principle of ongoing professional development, and us never stopping to learn, never stopping developing. And there are a series of awards, both national and regional, that you can consider, because you will be super proud of your apprentices. It will be a really rewarding experience for you all. And we would love to see that celebrated for the sector to be taking their place within this apprenticeship ecosystem. And what we do know from the level 3 is that these apprentices are really thriving. They are really relishing that experience of combining the practical application as they are learning. They grow in their confidence. Their endpoint assessment increases that confidence. It is a challenging assessment process, and to come through it gives them a real sense of pride. So we know that these apprenticeships are going to be a real benefit to the sector. We know that you're going to see your apprentices really contributing and getting promoted, as we already have. Just a little bit of success. We had Heather Berry, who undertook the level 3 library and archives apprenticeship, won the Regional Apprentice of the Year for Lancashire. So again, it's that principle that you can celebrate these successes, but it will be its own reward. So I think that's us, isn't it? Yeah. So thank you very much for the time.
Okay, hello. Nice to meet you. I'm Anthony Skates from Creative and Cultural Skills. Creative and Cultural Skills was set up about 20 years ago to be the Sector Skills Council for the creative industries, non-media. So if you think about anything that's in the creative industries that doesn't involve anything that's got a TV or a radio, we had a 20 years responsibility for looking at the interface between skills and the linkage between employers and education providers in the sector. And our main focus around that has been to open up pathways to the sector for those individuals who perhaps weren't attracted to the sector or couldn't find an entry route into the sector for whatever reasons, for their socioeconomic background or for whatever their geographical location. For that reason, we're incredibly pleased to be part of the process around the development and implementation and delivery of the Level 7 apprenticeship in Archives and Records Management. We think it's an incredibly innovative standard. We think it'll really have a significant impact in transforming the workforce in the sector. So thank you very much to the National Archives for asking us to be involved. Why is it important? Obviously, for all of those issues that we've just discussed about widening participation, about exploring routes into the sector. I won't cover this in too much detail because lots of other organizations have talked about it in more detail. But for us, the most significant thing about an apprenticeship within the sector is to thinking about it being a job, being an occupation, being it a role that somebody comes to you, that they are employed by you as an organization. And that's a key issue, that when we do develop our workforce development support programs, it's about getting that idea through to organizations that this isn't an intern, it isn't a trainee, it's a person who's employed by you as an apprentice. They're part of your permanent workforce, or have a temporary employment contract with you, but they are a worker who is who is supported with their training package. And I just wanted to re-emphasize that at that point. How will we support you? We've been obviously had a partnership with the National Archives in a previous program to support the sector to look at apprenticeships in its broadest sense. But in this level 7 program, what we really want to look at is a set of workshops that allow potential employers to look at what it means to have an apprentice, what it means to recruit an apprentice, what it means to set up an apprenticeship pathway within your organization. What that means then in terms of how you need to adapt your recruitment processes. One of the key messages we need to get across is that in terms of apprenticeships, you're recruiting to potential. It's somebody who will be able to do that job in 3 years' time, but actually at the moment they may not have the skills, knowledge and experience that actually you would want them to have if you wanted them to do that job next week. So it's really transformational for you as an organization, as organizations, to think about that way of recruiting to potential rather than existing experience. And we will also, we'll be developing those workshops with you. We'll also be developing workshops around mentoring within the workplace. One of the key things, obviously, that Westminster Education Services said there was about the role of a mentor, and we see that as a vital part of apprenticeships, and we will be supporting organizations to think about that as an exploration, looking at different models of apprenticeships. A lot of this is stuff that we've developed out of working with the sector for the last 4 or 5 years as part of an Arts Council funded project, our sector support offer. And so we have significant experience of looking at these issues. So hopefully you will find that useful in your engagement with us, and you will find that hopefully we have the knowledge to support you through that process. And then obviously, as we know that with any training session, we don't have the capacity to meet all needs within a 1 hour training session with a group of 20 people. So there's the opportunity, obviously, to follow up on an individual one-to-one basis with us to support that. And I will just say how we can support you. There's obviously, I'm your main interface, and please come and have a chat with me or contact me online. But we also have a team of advisors throughout England who can be our point of contact as well.